Welcome to the Classroom Café, where it's all about brewing the conversation between fellow educators. This special presentation is brought to you by the United Federation of Teachers and the union's Member Assistance Program. Thank you for joining us today. We hope this podcast inspires you, nourishes you, and motivates you. Now let's get started.
Hi there. Welcome to this episode of the Classroom Cafe podcast. We're so glad you could join us for what promises to be a fascinating conversation. Today, we're talking about teens and mental health in part one of our two-part conversation with Lexi Moulet. So let's dive right in.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Classroom Cafe podcast. I'm Selma Williams, your host, joined by our co-host, Janice Acosta.
I'm Janice Acosta, Clinical Coordinator at the UFT Member Assistance Program.
Today, we have a special guest, Lexi Moulet, who is a DBT clinician and owner of Wise Mind Counseling. Lexi, welcome.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me. I'm so pumped to be here.
We're excited to have you.
Thank you, guys.
So with May being Mental Health Awareness Month, we wanted to bring in Lexi Moulet to talk to us a little bit about mental health in teens. We know a lot of our listeners out there are educators. Some of you are even parents and may be experiencing some challenges with the teens that you have at home or even the teens that you see in your school buildings. Teens are a funny age, right? They are precocious, they're curious, they push boundaries, they test limits, they're moody. So how do we know when these behaviors are becoming something that we should look out for? So today with us we have Lexi Moulet, who is, as Salma had just said, a DBT clinician. And she just recently started a DBT group with teens. So we thought she'd be the perfect person to talk to today about teens and mental health, and also how we can talk to our teens about incorporating mindfulness.
Very, very important.
Yeah, teens are, I find, guys, that teens are, like you said, Denise, it's its own ball game, right? It's a completely different thing than anything I've ever worked with before. And I'm so used to working with adults. And as you said, I started my teen group recently, and I'm learning a lot as I do it. There's a lot of different ways to notice if you're a teenager or one of your students is struggling with mental health and when to really address it.
What are some things that you're seeing, or what are some things that our listeners can look out for when it comes to teens and mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I guess I want to say first that everyone's obviously different, right? In the way that we all present in our struggles with mental health can come across in different ways. But some of the things that I'm seeing pretty consistently across the board with my clients is one of the first things I see a lot is isolation, like social isolation, right? As, like starting to withdraw from friends, starting to withdraw from their family, being in their rooms more, not wanting to really engage in hangouts with their friends. That's one of the first things I typically notice, and you hear a lot of parents say stuff like, my kid doesn't want to come out of his room, right? So that's one of the things I see: increased irritability, decreased energy, mood swings. Here's something that's interesting: drastic changes in expression. I'm sure you guys see this, but something like a change in the way they dress drastically, or speech, or their hobbies and what their interests are. Every now and then we'll have a teenager who will all of a sudden drop their friends and start hanging out with a different crew, or start dressing very differently. And it's an indication that not necessarily that something bad is happening, but just something's happening,
I noticed that you mentioned, if they're withdrawn a little bit and always in their room. I mean, I don't know a teen that isn't withdrawn, right?
Very true. Very true.
But I think what you're saying is that if they have multiple of these symptoms, like compounded, then it should be okay. I just want to make sure, because I've got a 13-year-old and I don't see her often because she's always tucked away somewhere, and they're talking with her friends, right, doing things that interest her. So I just wanted to make that distinction.
I think that it comes along with some like it's such a good point because right, I didn't want to hang out with my parents when I was a teenager.
No, not at all.
Does anybody when they're a teenager?
No.
But I think it's in combo. I think it really becomes an issue when it's in combination with a couple other things that you might be seeing. Like I said, that maybe increased irritability, decreased anger. Something else to look out for too is, and a lot of you teachers who are listening, I think, can really be helpful on this front, but is looking at declining grades or attention span in school, right? Like a lack of motivation. And then here's also another thing: changes in sleeping or eating patterns. We're dealing with teenagers, a lot of which have social media. And Janice and Selma, we've talked about this before on other occasions where social media can be really dangerous, a lot, especially for young women.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Right. So a big population that I work with is young women with eating disorders. And I can't tell you how often I hear them say, like, oh, I saw this on Instagram and I wanted to, drop 5 pounds. So I just stopped eating for the weekend. Or, I worked out more than I usually would. Right. And so things like that, like eating habits and sleeping patterns can be a key sign if they're struggling.
Wow.
It's tough. The social media thing is really tough.
So how is the, just focusing on social media for a minute. I mean, I know some methods, right, or some parenting strategies is to completely eradicate or try to police the amount of access there is. Is that something that you would advise as a strategy?
Oh, good question. Actually, I would say I'm going to give my full disclosure because I'm not a parent. So anyone who's listening who's like, is she a parenting expert? I am not a parenting expert and never claimed to be one. But what I will say is that I think getting rid of it altogether could be a little risky in the sense of if they don't have it, will they try to go in several different dangerous ways to get access to it, right? Like if they're not allowed to have it, will they create fake accounts and will they download it on other phones? And so I don't have a problem with them having it. I think that it's not a bad idea to talk with them about it and have an open communication with who they follow and what they're looking at and what they use it for and their intentions for using it.
Right, and that leads us to the crux of our discussion today. How do you do that, right? If you've got a teen who's exhibiting these signs or more than one of these signs, how do you broach the subject? How do you start talking about it?
Right. So it's funny that, we're talking about this because, like I said, in the last few months, I've just been getting learning so much about how teenagers work, right? And it really is. It's so different than adults. Whereas an adult, you could sit down with them and say, hey, what's going on? Right. And they'll probably open up to you. Teenagers, you got to finesse it a little bit more. You got to, what I found in the last few months is that more often than not, what teenagers are craving is less talking from us as the adults and more listening. I'll give you a little anecdote. So I have a client, I do treatment teams with them, with their parents, and oftentimes the parents and I take the front seat and just kind of steer the ship, as we would say, in terms of the conversation, what we're talking about, and the treatment that the client's going through. And then a few weeks ago, the client said to me, "Can we have a session where everyone just turns their microphone off and just listens to what I have to say?" And we said, okay, yeah, sure, let's do that. That actually sounds like a great idea. And get this, we did that. We had a treatment team. It was me, the client, their parents, and their other psychiatrist. And when I tell you the drastic change of their demeanor from the beginning of session to after, just to be able to share and let go of what's going on without fear of interruption or fear of correction on how they should be seeing things or viewing things, it was a game changer. Game changer.
And to just backtrack a little bit, because you mentioned treatment team, and I don't think a
Right.
lot of people understand, the basis of DBT. So if we could just get just an overview of DBT so we can kind of understand the context in which you saw this specific client.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll kind of do a quick elevator pitch, but DBT is dialectical behavioral therapy, and it's a type of therapy that focuses on 4 different areas. It focuses on mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. And one of the ways that DBT therapists like to conduct therapy is through group itself, individuals, and then what's called treatment teams, where the client and their providers and their family, whoever they want involved in their well-being and their treatment, meets once a month, once every 2 weeks, whatever is appropriate. And we get together just like a regular session and we all talk about the goals, how we're moving towards those goals, and what we can be doing to support the client. And inevitably, the client is always, always part of that, even if they're a teenager, because we want them to feel that they are. That they're a part of their decisions, which they are. We're there to help them. We're just rowing the boat with them.
No, but thank you for that, Lexi, because it's important to know, or it's important for our listeners to know, just your background, what you do, and just the basics of DBT,
Yeah.
and how it could be impactful for certain individuals who are struggling with different types of things in regards to their mental health. So thank you for that.
I feel like teenagers, I don't know if it's by way of stigma or history of how it's always been with teenagers. I think that they are reluctant to open up to adults, especially authority figures like parents or teachers. I think they're reluctant because they don't want to be penalized in some way, right? Or they're worried that they're going to upset somebody. And
Sure.
I found that the listening and talking less strategy that I've been taking on now with my clients, it's like I said before, I use the word game changer, but it has been. I feel like when I just sit there and say, "Hey, tell me what's going on. I'm just going to listen and you can share whatever you like." They just take the space and they share.
Wonderful. Even thinking about, right, like I have a little one, he's nowhere near a teenager, but even just being an adult who, a caregiver to a child, regardless of age, right? We give them so much direction, even every day in the school building, right? Children are hearing so much direction. Don't do this, don't do that. Make sure you do this. Eat all your food, eat your vegetables, button up your shirt, tie your shoes, right?
Yep.
That when we actually allow them a moment and an opportunity to, as opposed to being barked at or being, told what to do or guided or whatever that may be, to hear that they actually take the space to talk is, as you said, Lexi, you've been learning so much. And I imagine that it's something that's really powerful for the teenagers that you're working with. And I would imagine for all children, regardless of age, right? To have someone, a caring adult in front of you who you trust and who is asking you, hey, you tell me what's going on. I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to listen for a moment.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I was going to say, I also have been implementing this technique that is not an official technique, but something that I've been finding has been helpful. Let's call it the BS technique. Okay. So what I would mean by that is I think it's okay sometimes to engage your kids, whether they're your children or your teenagers as far as school goes, your students, in a little bit of like BS talk, right? Like talk that doesn't really isn't heavy, keeps it light, right? And I'll give an example of how it's been working for me in my groups at least. Something like, oh my God, I just watched like the best movie last night. Have you guys seen any good movies lately? Like something like that. Or, oh my God, did you or did you see that new TikTok that just came out? What do you think about it? Like some kind of lighthearted whatever, and then you put it out there. And what happens is what I engage my clients in this kind of lighthearted BS talk, they start to drop their guard a little bit, right? And then what happens is sometimes they'll let out like little nuggets of information as they're talking. So, for example, in group a couple weeks ago, we were talking about our one of our favorite movies. And I was saying mine is the Titanic because I'm a millennial and I love the Titanic movie. You guys are going to get a kick out of this. I asked them what their favorite movie is in one group, and I thought they were going to hit me with like Frozen and like all these younger movies. Some of them were saying Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I'm going, do you even know what that is? But they knew. One of them said Revenge of the Sith. They were like, they were throwing some old school names at me, so I was pretty into it. But one of them said, I forget the name of the movie, what it was, but she said, I watch this movie a lot when I'm feeling down. I watched it the other night. And that was just like, again, we started with BS talk. What's your favorite movie? Just kind of like shooting the breeze. And then she let in a little nugget. But, I watch it when I'm upset. I actually watched it the other night, which gives me a window then to say, oh, so sounds like you were upset the other night since you did watch it. Like, what's going on there? And it just gives me a little foot in the door to not be like, to not sit them down and say, what's wrong with you? Because that's intimidating and a lot for a teenager. Yeah, so that technique has been helpful for me at least.
Yeah. And when we sit the kids down, right, and be like, what's wrong with you? What's going on? Give me all the information. It can sometimes feel like an interrogation. And all that pressure to answer the questions and to respond in a way that is.
And some of them might not even know what's wrong. They may not know how to describe it, right? Or to even recall it in the moment, right? And so I think, Lexi, what you're saying is so key, to have that relationship with them or rapport with them so that they can drop those things into your lap. And you, as the adult who has the wisdom and the understanding and the experience, can kind of help draw it out of them.
Exactly. Yeah, sometimes even as adults, we can't really put our finger on what it is we're feeling or the emotion that we're experiencing. And it's a lot to expect a teenager to do the same,
Yeah. Yeah.
And they've got so many emotions, right? They've got all these, their hormones are going haywire. They've got so many things going on and pressures from all different facets of their life. And just being there as an adult that's not, I guess, requiring or putting a demand on them can mean so much more, I think, to them.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot going on with all their hormones changing. Not only that, but they're in school with their peers every single day. And like we were just talking about, social media. Man, I went to school at a time where social media wasn't a thing. And I can't imagine yeah, right. Thank God. I can't imagine what it would have been like if every move that we made was tracked and showed to everybody that we were friends with. Could you guys imagine?
Or whatever you did, however stupid it may be, can live on forever.
So true, Selma. So true. Yeah. Once it's out there, it's out there.
Yeah. I mean, we've all done the dumbest things possible, but thankfully there's no record of it.
If there was a record of it, of all of our wrongdoings, that would be intense. And, but these kids these days, they're dealing with a whole different beast with not only social media tracking those things, like you said, Selma, but also the fact that, there's cyberbullying and that can happen as well. And parents might not always be super looped into that happening because it's not right in front of their face, but rather more on the side of things, right? Covert in a way.
Yeah. Cyberbullying and all the ads that are targeted towards them, and the pressures that come from those advertisements. It's a heavy weight to bear as someone whose frontal lobe isn't completely developed.
Exactly.
So Lexi, as an educator, as a parent or caregiver, right? If you are seeing a teen that may be exhibiting some of these behaviors that you talked about that are a little bit concerning, right? They're withdrawing, maybe there's changes in eating or sleeping, they're dressing differently, hanging out with people who maybe they don't normally hang out with, or they're introducing lots of new friends, or if you're noticing any of these signs, what are some ways that you can approach a child, a teenager? Kind of ask them, hey, what's going on? What's up?
Right, exactly. In that same way you just kind of mentioned it, right? I think approaching it in a very natural, organic way is helpful. And here's, I will say this, that I think that it takes a few times for a teenager, really most people, to open up, right? So I think a good
Mm-hmm.
technique would be to do the I notice technique, like, hey, I've noticed that you're not, doing hockey as much as you used to. You used to love hockey. What's going on there? Right? And delivery is so important as well, right? To not use any kind of judgmental tone or punitive tone, right? But more in a get curious kind of way. I think that that's helpful. But what I was going to say is that it's very likely that the first time, even the first few times you ask, that your kiddo is going to be like, nothing, I'm fine, right? Because they don't want to get into it. They don't want to, or they don't know how, whatever it might be. But I would encourage everyone listening who's either a teacher or a parent to continue to open the space for them. And if they don't take the space right away, try not to get too discouraged, because just them knowing that you're there to talk about it when they're ready, hopefully they will.
Consistency is key.
A lot of consistency. And then you can even like say some of those things that's really putting it out there, like, there's no judgment, I'm only here to support you, tell me what's going on, right? Using phrases like that. This is I'm just here to listen, tell me what's been going on with your friend group, right? Or I see that you started to do I saw that you took up you've been playing more video games lately. What are you playing? What makes you happy about playing video games? Why do you like that? Asking questions, but not being too overbearing about it either, and knowing that they can come to you is very helpful. And like I said, even if they don't open up right away and they give you the, it's fine, mom, stop asking, kind of thing, the fact that you ask, somewhere in their brain, they remember that you're open to hearing about it. So when they're ready, hopefully they will decide, oh, you know what, I do want to talk to my mom about it. And then they'll come through. It's tough though, because a lot of them, I think, like we said before, a lot of them they don't have the words to use when they describe emotions and how they're feeling. I think there's a big embarrassment factor too, right? No one wants to admit that they're sad or getting bullied or feeling less than, and to admit that out loud is really hard, right? So sometimes even maybe putting it out there and being like, I saw that your girlfriends had a hangout the other night and they didn't invite you. Like, are you okay? How does that feel? You can even put it out there for them to respond to it, because they might not even have the words themselves.
You and Selma both mentioned that sometimes teens don't have the words for it, right? Or maybe they're embarrassed, or they don't want to admit that they're sad, or that they're feeling alone, or anxious, or whatever it is that's going on for them, right? So what are ways, or what are some things that adults, educators, caregivers can do to kind of break that stigma and let them know it's okay. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel whatever you're feeling.
Right. Yeah, no, you're so right though. It is embarrassing, and it is, like I said, who wants to admit that they're having a tough time? And I was just thinking this, Janice, as you were asking that question, that, like, again, bringing the social media factor into this, who wants to admit that they're struggling when all of their friends are posting about how much fun they're having on the weekends, and you're up against what looks like a really awesome time or an awesome experience somewhere, and here you are feeling down about it, and when someone asks, saying, I don't feel good, that's a big ask of somebody to say that. They don't want to have to admit that. I think in terms of what caretakers or teachers or parents can do, I think is normalize it, right? Normalize that these things happen. I know for me and my group, one of the best techniques that I've done and used, and this isn't necessarily even just with teenagers, this is with just people in general, have the humility and ability, to share that this is a normal human experience. Most everyone feels a little bullied at some point. Most everyone feels left out at some point.
Most everyone feels sad at some point.
Right, exactly. Some days are good days and some days not so much. And I use this technique all the time in both of my, adult group and my teens group, of being like, I've been there, I get it. I've had a really hard time too. I understand what it's like to feel left out. Things like that, just really validating and affirming that this is a normal experience, because when you're a teenager and you go through that, you guys remember how you feel like you're the only one in the world, right? Like you feel like you're the only one in the world who wasn't invited to this thing, or the only one in the world who's sad the way you are. And to open it up and see role models like teachers and therapists and parents be like, hey, babe, I've been there. I get it. You're not alone. It means more than you think it probably would. Yeah, I think that talking to them about it and sharing your own, of course, with the same, with some semblance of, appropriateness, and not getting too into detail, but sharing that you too, as somebody who they look up to, goes through mental health struggles, just because that's a human nature, right? Can be very helpful.
Yeah. So sharing our own mental health things that we've overcome and normalizing it.
Exactly. Like I said, like one of my teens recently went through a situation where all of her girlfriends, she has a big group of girlfriends, and all of them decided to do something, and they didn't invite her. And of course she felt terrible about it. And I actually, in our one-on-one consultation, when I was speaking with her, I said, I'm going to level with you. I've been there. I've been left out of situations before when I was around your age, and it feels terrible. And it feels like you're not a priority and that they don't care about you. But don't forget that this is one hangout of many. You've been at many other hangouts, and you'll be at many more. But just know that I've been there as well, and so has everybody. Just something like that. Again, does it work instantly? Are the kids going to be like, "Wow, thanks. That was the most helpful thing I've ever heard"? No, I don't. I don't think so. I think that they'll very much be like, "Okay, Lex, whatever. We heard you." But they actually do hear you, because in the next time they're talking about it, they open up a little bit more. So even if they act like they don't care or they don't hear you, they're listening.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm hearing like manage your expectations too, right? Allow yourself to be vulnerable and take that leap and share like your own experiences to encourage them to open up, and also know that they may not open up immediately. But again, consistency is key.
Super, super manage your expectations, because it takes time. I mean, I'm now on, I want to say this upcoming Wednesday will be my 6th week of the DBT for Teens group. And I got to tell you, the first few sessions, it was pretty bone dry. It was pretty much me talking to myself. Right. It was. And I'm telling them, like, guys, can you turn on your camera? I'm calling on them, asking them what they think about the material. And it was crickets. And I had to really, Janice, as you said, manage and adjust my expectations, because they weren't engaged like my adults. And then this past week, it was amazing. Mostly all of them had their cameras on. They were engaged. They were chit-chatting with each other, not just me. And it was like, oh my God, because I started opening the door early on to let it be a lighthearted group, to let it be a group where they're there to get support. And slowly, it's like letting like a baby bird come to you. Like slowly, they started to do it, and now they're cohesive, and it's actually really cool to see. But definitely expectations, we can't expect them to be on the same level as us as adults. Their brains are still developing, and they're navigating through a really tough crowd of peers, I'm sure.
Yeah. I love that. I love that there's been some payoff for you with your group. And it's so I imagine it's just really beautiful to see that happen.
Yeah, and I mean it's the culture, that not the culture. It's their developmental stage as well, right? Like they're seeing if they can trust you, right? Is she gonna if we are disconnected, and if we are, distant or seemingly unengaged, is she going to call this group quits? Am I going to see this lady next week? And you're being consistent, and you're being there and not making the expectation too burdensome. By the fifth week, you're like, you know what, let me just give in. This lady is good. She's not going anywhere.
It's really true, Selma. You're right. I didn't think of it in that sense, but they definitely are testing and holding out to see, like, is she going to keep trying? And, You guys know me. Consistency is key. Like we said before, I'm going to keep going with them until they decide to open up. And I'll even like be playful with them about it, which is another technique that I think could be helpful for parents and teachers listening in terms of getting through to their teenagers. Like being a little playful here and there. Like I'll even say to one of my clients, like, okay, like if I ask them a question in group and they don't want to answer and they're just like really short about it and they'll be like, yes or no, just one word answer. I'll say, all right, you're a tough cookie to crack, but I'll get you one day. I'll get you. Like something silly like that. And, you know, even if they crack just like the littlest smile, that's a moment of rapport that I'm building with them. And maybe the next session, they'll be like, I can say a couple more words. So it's slow going. And I feel a lot for the parents because I understand that there's probably such a sense of wanting to connect right now, right away. And it's tough. I imagine, Selma, you deal with that with your 13-year-old. It's like you want to connect with them on a level that makes sense, but it's almost got to be on their time, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And there are different types of teenagers, right? Some teenagers are very chatty, very, very chatty, and I've got a more reserved teenager, and there's beauty in both, right? And really, but I think what you said is really that relationship and conversation being a part of our everyday life before they even become teenagers, right? So it's normal to talk to mom or dad or aunt or teacher about things that are bugging me and not be a burden to them, or what I'm going through not be belittled or overlooked. Or, I've heard as a teenager, oh, you don't have any real problems, right? Like you're not paying any bills, and that's the culture that I grew up under, right? Like there's nothing that a teenager should complain about. They've got food, they've got a roof over their head. Why should they have concerns? Mental health, what is that? You've got, there are people in another country that's starving and you worrying about different things. And so I think it starts way before they become teenagers. And if you are, a little late to the game, consistency, being consistent, being persistent to really let them know that they matter and that you're here for them.
I love that, Selma. You're so right. And I grew up in a time like that as well. Like, come on, stop crying. my mom, my mom used to say, don't cry. I'll give you something to cry about. Right. Like,
Right.
it's one of those things where we come from obviously a different generation than these kids now. And, I love how you said consistency and persistency. And the more that they get familiar with you and the more that they get familiar with the fact that you are interested, even if they test you time and time again to show you that they're uninterested, they might come around. And my experience has been pretty good with that consistency that they do end up coming around, you know?
Yeah.
It's really special. And I was going to say too that you're right, Selma, that there's different kinds of teenagers and they all deal with things very differently. But a big part of this as well too is how they see their role models, the people in their life who they look up to, how they see them handling their own emotions, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the time, some of my clients, a lot of their ways of regulating their emotions are directly reflected in the same ways that they were demonstrated by their parents. So if there's somebody who withdraws a lot, chances are that they could be they could have seen that. They could have seen that when their mom gets upset, they withdraw and they don't speak for a few days, or they stop showing affection or something like that. And so sometimes it's picked up by way of what you're around.
Yeah. And I think it's key too, even if you are one of those parents or those educators or influences in a teen's life, and you've displayed these negative behaviors, right? It's okay, right? Understanding that now, I think it's important to acknowledge it, right? I'm a big proponent of acknowledging things and apologizing to teenagers and children. I think that they see and they're very capable of understanding things. And I think if they can, the more human they see you, the more they'll be able to connect with your humanity and be vulnerable around you.
Yeah, well said, Selma. That's so true. Yeah, they have to see that you're normal and you're human, and that this is something that we all go through, right? Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Selma. That was great.
Yeah, I mean, there was this, and I'm probably going to misquote it, but in situations of crisis or when you want to intervene, I've always remembered just bring your humanity to the situation. And it can completely shift the entire feeling in the room, right? Instead of trying to fix it, how can I normalize what's going on here and kind of put not a band-aid, but kind of to calm the situation a little bit, you know? That's kind of how I try to think about it.
Yeah. And I wanted to make a comment too, some on what you said about apologizing and having some vulnerability and, and accountability even, right? With with teenagers, because I think, again, I was saying this before, whether it's by way of stigma of what the expectation of a dynamic is between adult and teenager, or if it's just the way that they are feeling in that moment, I think they're always in a position to feel either less than, or like they're in a punitive position, or like there's going to be a reprimand to some degree. And to see an adult make a faux pas, right? Again, bring your humanity to the situation, make a faux pas and say, you know what, guys, I'm sorry. That wasn't the right way to say that. I'm so sorry. Or I should have asked this instead. I think that that's huge. I think that that's huge and amazing.
Yeah, we're modeling human behavior to them and modeling flaw and modeling how we can move through it and move past it.
Exactly. Exactly. And the more they see that, the more then they can recognize that, right, emotions, while they're difficult, they are fleeting and passing sensations through the body, right? And not lasting forever. But that's where a lot of the destructive behavior could come out, is when they're feeling in a place of, I'm always going to be sad, or I'm always going to feel unwanted, or I'm always whatever, right? To show that these things come and go, for everybody.
And that's also by asking or being curious and giving them space to talk and share.
Exactly, exactly. That interest is huge.
Well, thank you, Lexi. I think everything that you shared here will definitely be a benefit to our listeners. We appreciate your time and all of the years of experience that you have invested into mental health and to teens now. We're so excited about that. Where can folks connect with you if they wanted to follow up, if they wanted to maybe even enroll in your group? How could they find you?
Absolutely. Selma, thank you for that. And by the way, I'm so grateful to have been here with you guys and have this discussion. It was really fun. Yeah, people can reach out to me on my cell. I can give that information, or my email. My email is wisemindIC for individual counseling at gmail.com. You can always go onto Google and do Wise Mind Counseling NYC, and it's one of the first ones that pops up on the Google page there. So always feel free to reach out, whatever works best for anybody. I'm always here to help and offer support, or even if it's just resources for books. We recently started a support group for parents whose kids struggle with borderline personality disorder, and it's filling up. It's a great group. It's sometimes yeah, it's hard for parents to know. I mean, that's the whole crux of this conversation, right? It's hard for parents and teachers to know how to help, and I think getting the support for themselves is helpful as well.
That concludes part 1 of our conversation about teens and mental health with Lexi Moulet. We hope you'll also join us for part 2.
Once again, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Classroom Café. If you are a UFT member, the Members Assistance Program can be reached at 212-701-9620 or at mapinfo@uft.org.